Hey everybody, good morning. It is day 90 of spiritual healthcare. Welcome to another amazing morning. It is, of course, Monday, and I don't know. It's kind of rainy and cloudy here today. I don't know where it is with you guys, but we are going to be hitting on some really great subjects today that I'm super excited about. So this is going to be a really good topic. We're going to be going over everything from narcissist to mental illness in the paranormal field and all sorts of things. This is going to end up to be a two-day topic, I think, because we've got lots to talk about both of those things. And somebody asked as well, somebody sent in a question actually recently about thoughts on Reiki and healing and things like that. So lots and lots of stuff to cover today and tomorrow. And then I'm going to be off for a few days, going to on a little excursion out with my partner, so that'll be really fun. We haven't seen each other in like months and months, so it's gonna be really good. So good morning everybody. Good morning Dan and Ed, nice to see you guys. Nice to see everybody. Patricia, who's normally here, is back at work today for the next couple of days, so it's gonna be kind of weird to not see her popping up. But she's back at work. But welcome to you guys. Welcome to everybody. And this is going to be really cool because I'm really looking forward to grabbing onto these topics today. I think there's been quite a few questions about them, and it comes up a lot within the paranormal world. This whole idea of mental illness and narcissism and all sorts of things like that. So we're going to grab onto all of that today and start to hash through it today and tomorrow. Good morning to Kaz. Good morning to Sally. Nice to see you. I hope you guys are having relatively good weather. I know, like, everybody seems to be in like heat waves and stuff like that. Like, it's crazy. For us right now, like, we've got rain and it's, I don't know, it's not fabulous, but it's there anyway. So yeah, so this is going to be really good. And there's been a lot of talk, of course, over the last number of months and stuff like that about things like mental illness and whatever, but we haven't really touched on personality disorders and stuff like that and how it can kind of influence the field and the work and when we're dealing, especially when you're dealing with different industries and things like that, how it all plays into effect. It's really crazy. Good morning, Brandy. Good morning, Shadow. Nice to see you guys. Always good to see you guys. It's like, yeah, as I say, it's this is going to be a really interesting class. There was so many people that I think had so much to say about their own experiences with things like narcissism and sociopathy and stuff like that. That I really do think it's worth bridging into and talking about, because it's becoming more prevalent in society over the last number of years. It's become there's been an explosion of identifiers, I think, when people are starting to realize that this isn't this isn't just people that are too high on themselves or full of themselves, or self-centered. It's so much more than that. It's so much deeper than that. And oftentimes I'll hear people, say, oh, I'm so narcissistic. And it's like, no, it's like the depth of what that is and what that looks like is so much greater than what people realize, because we're used to the definition that came originally from the legend of Narcissus, right? And Narcissus was basically told, don't look at yourself in the mirror. And that's where it came from. It was like he just got the constant reaffirmation of and all the attention and whatnot from himself out of this mirror. So but the reflection in the mirror actually does have something to do with it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I've had some crazy run-ins with narcissists. Of course, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I've definitely had some first-hand experience with some pretty interesting insight into how they work, what they look for, how they target people, all sorts of things like that. And when you're dealing in the paranormal field, it's interesting because you kind of have to be aware of some of these different levels of crazy that you run into, and mental illness and things like that is, of course it's always on the table, but narcissism is a very specific kind of disorder that can dysfunction, that stems from a very disrupted core. So we're going to chat about that a little bit. But the first question that I wanted to grab before we get onto that subject, which I thought was really good, actually came from Ed, who's asking, what are my thoughts on Reiki and healing? So this I thought was great, and so all of this is going to blend into to our subject today by the end of it, I swear. But so my thoughts on Reiki and healing. So this is always a varied subject for me, because the one thing that really gets me about a lot of healers and things like that is the fact that they fail to teach the people themselves that they are their own physician. That their state of being, cleaning up their own stuff, is really the key to healing in so many different areas, not just mental stuff, but physical stuff too. So I think healers definitely have their place. I think it's important. I think a healer can contribute to somebody's allowing state, which will allow them to heal themselves. But I think it's a misnomer to think that person or that individual specifically is actually doing all of the work or all of the healing. And as I say, what bothers me about a lot of the healers that are out there is the fact that when they come in and they're dealing with people, they tend to end up with sort of this dependence on the people around them. Or getting the client to depend on them for that feeling of well-being and healing and things like that. So I definitely have it's a mixed bag for me about it, because as I say, if you've got somebody who is, able to teach people how to get into that allowing state, whatever their process might be, and then instruct the person on how to achieve that, then you've got somebody who's really powerful, who's really doing the work because they're starting to empower other people. But as soon as you've got somebody who is causing that patient or causing that person to be reliant on them for their own well-being or their own sense of healing or whatever it is, then I think you've got a problem. And that person, let me tell you, will have a lineup outside their door a mile long. And that's not productive either. So that's kind of my take on Reiki, and because I've had quite a few people ask me about it. So I think for me, when I think of people that are healers and things like that, I think of individuals who, are able to help that person get into an allowing state regardless of their process. And then they can turn around and start to teach those people, this is how you do it. This is how you find that allowing place. And to me, that's really the key. Instead of creating the dependence, they create the empowerment. And I think that's really important. So the other question that I thought was really awesome actually came in from Dan this morning, and I thought this was really interesting because we're talking about what do we do when we run into this stuff, and of course things like mental illness and whatnot. We're seeing these spikes now because of the pandemic, because of everything that's been closed down, that's been people have been undergoing some pretty serious hardship, especially where there hasn't been a payments coming in and stuff like that. Like the people are really running into a lot of trouble, and I suspect that as we move forward with paranormal research and groups continue to investigate and things like this, I think we're really going to see a change in the type of cases that we end up getting. And what I mean by that is I actually had one, this was a number of months ago now. It was a call from a sort of a colleague in Calgary with a really interesting problem. And it was somebody who hands down believed that they were, and I can't remember the details of this, but they were basically believed that they were curing the virus with their blood, that they had it was a complete delusional set of problems, but also believed at that point that they were possessed, and there was a bunch of things going on. So anyway, long story short, we basically ended up deciding we have to call mental health services and whatever and have it dealt with. But I think when we're with the pandemic and things like that, we are gonna see a different type of case coming in, because we've got a very unique and unprecedented set of circumstances right now. So the question that Dan was asked was really good. If a person claims that a voice told them to hurt themselves or another person, and they have 3 scratches on their arm, what do you do? So this is the type of case that I'm talking about, is that when we get into situations where we've got people who are you know, they've got some sort of a mental illness, or, you know, regardless of what that might be. You know, they've been triggered because, of course, you know, everybody's under stress and things like that right now, you know, and they're claiming that it's a ghost. They're claiming that it's some sort of like supernatural phenomenon. I had another woman, and this was quite a while ago now, but claimed that she was being electrocuted by a spirit. Like, she's, you know, also she was feeling like she's being electrocuted. So all sorts of weird sensations and delusions that were not associated in any way with paranormal phenomena. So I think we have to be really careful when we're going into this, and this is one of the reasons why I say, if you've got a paranormal group or team, or you're beginning to set something like that up, that you absolutely have to have some sort of medical professional as a consultant within the group itself, because you're going to run into this. And it's really important that we are able to sort of separate, like, okay, well, where is that line? What does that look like? So what do you do when you get a case like this? What do you know, when somebody comes to you and you're like, man, something's not right with this? I think one of the go-to things when it comes to any sort of a situation where you've got somebody who is, you know, seeming like possibly hurting themselves, possibly, you know, schizophrenic, or, you know, some myriad of other disorders, is that you have to be able to turn around and refer them or call them to the you know, to the proper authority, or to the, you know, bring in the right people to start to deal with it. Refer them somewhere, because I think at that point, if you are turning around and you are stepping into a situation that you cannot deal with. You know, you are not paid to deal with this. You're not a physician, you're not a doctor, you're not a psychologist. You have to be able to turn around and say something is just off here, and you can't support the delusion, right? Like, you can't support the delusion, because the delusion it'll mess you right up, and it'll further mess the person up as well, especially if they're under treatment or anything like that. You can't do that. So there's oftentimes where I will actually refer clients regardless to a psychologist or to a psychiatrist to make sure that they're okay, because otherwise, you know, you can't deal with it. You might also be dealing with something like medication interactions. That's the other problem, right? So you've got these different medications that are interacting, and if you don't know what those drugs are, or you don't know what they do, then you're not being effective at that point. You have to bring people in, or refer these people somewhere where they can get treatment, where that you're not going to be able to give them. So that being said, the topic of today, and probably what's going to end up to be the topic of tomorrow too, because there's so much to talk about this whole thing, is the idea of narcissists and narcissistic personality disorder, and what that looks like, what that is. And I think a lot of people tend to really get this screwed up with the idea of, as I say, somebody whose just ego is self-inflated. You know, maybe they're like a rock star or a movie star or whatever, and they're just, you know, oh, I'm a narcissist. And whatever, and we use that term really loosely in society, and we say, oh, I'm being so narcissistic today, or, you know, whatever. We think of it as something that's being very selfish, and where I've noticed this as a predominant problem sometimes within the paranormal field, as well as within the like, of course, entertainment business as well. It's a big thing. You get a lot of people like that, but I think it's really important that we narrow down the definition of this, because I'll start out by reading to you, and I'm going to bring this up actually, because I'm going to read it directly from you, so from the DSM-5, so that you guys actually know what this looks like. So narcissistic personality disorder, first of all, it's a cluster, what they call a cluster B personality disorder. So it's basically defined as a pervasive pattern of grandiosity. Okay, and it's all based in it's all based in fantasy. So it's this constant need for admiration, but a complete lack of empathy. So this is where things get going. It's sort of a grandiose sense of self-importance, and there's multiple characteristics that end up defining it, which we're going to go through here in a minute. But what people don't understand is that oftentimes it's the narcissist ego that is extremely fragile. We think that they're just there's these types of individuals that will walk into a space, and they think they're all that, and they're bragging, and they're, they really genuinely think they're awesome. But what's interesting is that sense of grandiosity is actually not exactly real. So we go back to the image of Narcissus in the mirror. And this is where the narcissists, and from what I've observed, get rather complicated. And that is the idea that in order to gain their sense of self, and we've talked about the sense of self so much here on Spiritual Healthcare, is understanding our sense of who we are, understanding that we are more than our jobs, more than our labels, all of those things. A narcissist does not have that. They don't have a self. There's no sense of self. It's fractured, it's broken. So what they do is that they've got these mirrors around them, and the mirrors are other people. So if they are not receiving an image back that they like, that's a big problem. That mirror is broken. So guess what? That person who's not reflecting back to them something that they like and is busting their bubble of egoic personality, or that they're amazing, or isn't feeding into that ego problem, then guess what happens? They get damn mad, and oftentimes they throw you in the garbage. You're no more important to these people than a broken hairdryer. Really, it's really crazy. So I mean, and I had to learn this over the years, because, as I say, for me it was I had to really begin to understand just how fractured and dysfunctional their core really is. Because so many of us, and especially people who are more empathic, are more, gentle, or want to help people or whatever, oftentimes narcissists, they love to sit in a sob story. And it's really easy to turn around and want to help, because when you're people like us, we want to be able to help people and teach people and move them forward, and get them to a new place. And what's really hard for a lot of people to understand, especially people who are partners with somebody like this, is that they have no intention of moving forward ever. They don't want to move forward. They don't want the success they say they do. It's just, it's a constant, they will sacrifice that to the ends of the earth. And this is something that's really important to understand, especially if you're building a team, if you're building, even if you're building a company or anything like that, or you're looking for somebody to move forward with. Understanding the depths of the dysfunction is really important. So we're gonna touch on this in a number of different ways, and the one thing that I really wanted to address is it's a very interesting it's an interesting concept called the dark triad. Okay, so the dark triad is something within psychology and whatnot that they've kind of messed around with for a little while, and it's the idea that narcissists are kind of made up of a few different things, including Machiavellianism, sociopathy, and things like that. So the dark triad is unnerving, because these people, that disrupted core, that disrupted center, ends up to be something that it's not only projected, it's hidden for the first little bit, but eventually it becomes projected outwards as that mask begins to be dismantled. So the more you're with them, and usually the studies say it's about a period of about 3 weeks. After about 3 weeks, you start to see stuff that's not quite right. And they usually do really well. So they usually tend to make people happier. They're really good in job interviews. They're super good on first dates. They usually become leaders, which is why a lot of them are politicians. But they're not good ones. They're not good ones. They're usually the first to be promoted. They don't last in the promotion. They don't. It just doesn't work out. They're the most likely to drop out, and things like that. So it's really interesting to sort of to go through and to begin to understand that there is a deep-rooted problem with people, and not only with narcissistic personality, but with other disorders as well. So it's not just the one, but it comes in a few. So I'm actually gonna bring that up for you guys, and I'll post this on I will post this on the Entity Seeker Facebook page for you guys as well, so you can see it. So the dark triad is really difficult to sort of uncover and dig through. We're talking about Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, that all sort of get melded together. So you've got people with a very strong sense of arrogant entitlement. That's the number one thing. Very arrogant. They think they can get away with what they're doing. And what's really interesting as well is that they don't read the room well. So they will sit, and this has always been very interesting when I'm interviewing clients. This always comes forward, is that their lack of empathy actually prevent them from reading the space. So they will sit there and lie about something. They will lie their faces off about whatever it is. And as they're lying to you, and everybody in the room's looking at each other and rolling their eyes and whatnot, but because they don't have empathy, they can't put themselves in your shoes to realize that their story isn't being bought into. It's really interesting to watch. So they'll continue to perpetuate whatever the lie is or whatever's going on. As Serena's just saying here, narcissists are definitely as scary as any demonic entity could be. Yeah, it's really creepy to see just how far they will go to get their way and to get what they want. It's really disturbing. They have no remorse and no guilt for what they do. So many times people are very afraid of hurting their feelings. You know, if I say this to them or I say that to them, I'm going to hurt their feelings and I don't want them to be mad at me. They don't feel that. They don't feel remorse or guilt for what they do. They really don't. They're very irresponsible. They tend to be very self-destructive. So even though it doesn't seem to make any sense, this part of it. So when we're talking about a lot of these narcissistic traits, you know, you think somebody that's got a lot of arrogance and is very entitled would be, very self-protective, and they're not at all. They tend to be extremely destructive, not only to themselves, of course, but to other people. But they're the ones that are going to do the really, really risky, crazy behavior, which is sometimes why you see them, branch off and start up things like paranormal groups and stuff like that, because they think that there's this risk and adrenaline risk involved in it. So it's something to be watchful of. They also very much thrive on drama, so they will set up. Oftentimes you hear the term triangulation, where they'll set up a situation between maybe two other people, and they've got a bunch of people all going back and forth and talking to each other, but nobody's really, nobody's solving any problems, but everyone's talking behind their backs, and it's all because of one person. I had I was hired for a speaking engagement once, and the organizer was like this. And what kept everybody fighting was the fact that no one was actually speaking to one another. Everybody was always speaking to her. So, she would give you the information and you'd talk about it, but you'd never talk to the other person. So it's that type of isolation. Isolation is the number one tool of the abuser. If they can isolate you into a little bubble, then they can manipulate you and do a lot more with you. If you become dependent on that, that's really interesting. So Sally's saying that sounds like my director. We've always said that he's narcissistic. Yeah, it's common in this industry. It really is. They also sometimes will they will actually brag about outsmarting people. So the last person that they screwed over, they'll tell you. They'll come out and tell you. They'll be like, yeah, you know what? I couldn't believe this guy just fell for this. So they will come out and tell you about the last person that they just screwed over, and think it's a notch in their belt. They usually have a long-term history of very, very short-term relationships. So it's like they're just moving through things and people and whatever. There's not really anybody that wants to stick around, because they usually either get discarded because they're really good at that, or they clue in and they take off and they run. But I think one of the key factors in this, which I think is so important to go through today, is the fact that they really live in a fantasy world. The world that they exist in is delusional. They exist in a world where they rewrite the things that have happened to them to make themselves a victim. They're revisionist historians. Okay? They are... the ideas that they're having about situations make no sense. It's vast. It's just vast. And the world just, they live in an absolute creation of their own, that's not based in anybody else's reality. It's really wild what they'll come out with. So those are the points with these people that I think we really need to be aware of. There was a test that was brought out, from two psychologists, Peter Jonason and Greg Webster. It was something called the Dirty Dozen. And the Dirty Dozen was really interesting because it was basically a 7-point scale, 12-point test. where you could go through and start to ask yourself some of these questions, and based on, you know, whether you were a 1 through 7 within that scale, you could try to figure out whether or not, you know, you had narcissistic personality tendencies. So the Dirty Dozen has become kind of a staple test within psychology and things like that. But avoiding these people is really, really difficult when it comes to trying to identify them right off the bat. They tend to be really likable. Often they know how to be charismatic, they know what to say, they've learned. But again, we go back to that idea of Narcissus and the mirror, and we realize that they just become extremely good at mirroring behavior. Like really good at mirroring behavior, which is why they don't do well in therapy. You can send these people to therapy and it really doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because now they just learn what to say in order to be a better narcissist. So it's really, really, really tough. These people usually don't change. They do not have a good success rate in therapy. They really don't. They usually fail miserably. And at the end of it, you know, people have great hopes. Well, okay, people change, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, in this case, the chances of them changing are next to zero. Mainly because they just don't believe anything's wrong with them. You're the problem. And in order to be the victim, you have to be the problem. Somebody has to be perpetrating something against them in order to turn around and be the victim. And unfortunately, it often becomes you. So befriending these people, you know, trying to suck up to them, that kind of thing, it never works long term. At the end of the day, they will find someone to victimize them. And if they make it you, then they blow up all sorts of crazy. I dealt with one a few years ago, and it got so insane, and his stories got so ridiculous that literally the people around, nobody believed him. Nobody believed the stories that he was coming out with, but because they were just so outrageous and so ludicrous. But it was really interesting to watch him, because again, he couldn't read the room, couldn't understand that nobody was buying it, and he just kept going, and yeah, it was pretty crazy. So, but again, usually that ends up happening when you deliver something called a narcissistic injury, which is essentially busting their bubble, essentially. So if you bust somebody's bubble like this, they will blow up. You know, if you call them out, they will blow up. They will explode. There is nothing on the planet like a narcissistic rage, a narcissist having a tantrum, like nothing on the planet. They will do everything they can, and if they think that you are getting the upper hand, they will do everything they can to come at you. It's really crazy. They learn, but they learn your buttons, but they don't learn to do things differently themselves. So usually one of the key patterns with people like this to watch out for, especially if you're dealing with a client like this, is the fact that they're a non-learner. As my partner always calls them, a non-learner, and I think it's a brilliant way of putting it, because they tend to be in the same problem situation over and over and over and over and over again. And you can't seem to get them to learn anything different. It's really frustrating. They'll put themselves in the position of being victimized again and again and again and again, and you can't quite figure out why, but it's very deliberate. It's really interesting. It's very deliberate. So I wanted to get this topic going, because I think so many people can relate to it. I think there's been a lot of people who have had experiences with these individuals. And as I say, when you're dealing with clients, when you're dealing with, people as we move about the world, especially as say within entertainment or the paranormal or anything like that, these personality types have got to be, you got to be aware of them. You got to be aware of them. You got to be able to identify them. Even though sometimes it takes longer than others. I know quite a number of people who have been in relationships with people like this, and they are some of the most destructive human beings on the planet. It's really brutal. So tomorrow, what we're going to talk about is how they infiltrate into our experience, the techniques they use, the tactics they use, so that we're aware and we can watch out for them, as well as how to deal with it. What do we do with them? Once we've got one, what do we do with them without putting ourselves at risk, putting ourselves in danger and things like that? So we're going to go through that tomorrow. Because as I say, I think as we go through, there's quite a few politicians out there right now who are what they call a malignant narcissist. So yeah, it's very interesting. So the one thing I wanted to read to you guys a little bit today is actually out of probably, let's say, one of the best books, in my opinion, on sociopathy and narcissism and things like that, which is Life Code, Dr. Phil McGraw's Life Code. This book is probably one of the most comprehensive guides to these personality disorders that I've ever read, and it saved me many a time with individuals like this. So I want to read you guys a little snapshot out of it, because I think this is something that you guys will take something away from. So check this out. Let's talk about non-negotiable issues. Remember, in a true negotiation, the purpose is not to hurt the other person or even to gain power. As I emphasized, the number one requirement for any successful negotiation within a relationship is safety. If either side's safety is at issue, it's non-negotiable. Nobody should put up with abuse, for example, physical or emotional. There's no negotiating with a bully. In the sense of accommodating his need to hurt you or your child, it's not a matter of understanding his currency, because what he wants, a feeling of dominance and sadistic pleasure in other people's suffering, is not something you or anyone else should be giving any legitimacy to. You should never compromise your integrity in dealing with someone unscrupulous who's making abusive, manipulative, or unreasonable demands. And I think it's really important to remember that, because we're so used to compromise. We're so used to, wanting to have that negotiation, especially when we're dealing with things like clients. Of course, you're always looking to make sure that, you're working along with people when you're dealing with, for myself and dealing with TV shows and networks and stuff like that. You're always looking to come out, with both sides winning. You want both sides, because if the other side wins, then you're going to win as well, and whatnot. But the game changes with people like this. So tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about this, how to deal with them, how they do what they do, and we're gonna keep the discussion going, because let me tell you, this is it's important information, and as I say, I think everybody's run into at least one of them, and if you haven't yet, you probably will. So it's good information to have. So that being said, we've got some affirmations to do before we go, and I've noticed over the last while, everybody's just been so amazing with these affirmations. I've been getting so many comments about it. And Serena's asking how to help yourself also while dealing with these types of people. Yeah, this is what we got to get into. This is what we got to get into. Exactly on point is exactly that. How do we deal with that? And that's going to be tomorrow. It's all going to be tomorrow. How do you help yourself? Because let me tell you, with people like this, it does come down to helping yourself. It really does. So that being said, guys, we got to do some affirmations and get ready for tomorrow's class. Everybody take a breath. I'm a channel of peace and well-being, and my need for peace is abundantly met. I unconditionally accept, love, and appreciate myself for who I am. I recognize and am grateful for the abundance that is constantly flowing into my experience, which I can choose to allow or not. I feel with every breath a sense of peace and love. I help others by maintaining and tending to my connection with Source as much as possible. This well-being is accessible to me, even in a sea of uncertainty. And at this moment, all is well. I am able to liberate myself from my past and live with peace and serenity. I can see and appreciate all the beauty and abundance of life around me. I am able to embrace love while letting go of fear. And I find peace with the soothing silence of my inner being. Everybody take a breath. Guys, this is awesome. This is the beginning of a great conversation. I can't wait to continue it tomorrow. There is so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about with this subject. And if you guys have comments or questions or stories about it, send them to me, entityseeker@gmail.com. Yeah, we're going to continue this subject tomorrow. It's going to be really, really good. So stay tuned. Have an amazing day. And we'll get this rolling. Thank you, all of you. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Spiritual healthcare, guys. Bye.